Did you really hang those old embroidered towels on the TV again, Oksana Mikhailovna? Solyomia pinched the little handmade napkin between two fingers, as if it were something dirty, and tossed it from the kitchen table straight into the trash. We agreed this apartment would be modern minimalism, not some village house. Oksana froze, holding a wet plate in her hands. The sharp words stole her breath. Inside, everything tightened with a familiar, bitter sense of injustice. She stood in her own kitchen, the kitchen for which she had paid a mortgage for 15 long years, and now she had to justify every tiny thing to her son's girlfriend. Taras sat nearby, sipping coffee without taking his eyes off his phone, as if none of this concerned him at all. This isn't just a napkin, Solyomia, Oksana said quietly but firmly. It's a memory of my mother. She set the plate on a towel, bent down, pulled the embroidery out of the trash, and carefully brushed it off, though it was already clean. And we didn't agree on minimalism, she added. You asked to stay here for 6 months while you saved for a down payment. It's been a year and 2 months. Oh, please, not those calculations again, Solyomia rolled her eyes. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed over her chest. Her expensive silk robe contrasted sharply with Oksana's worn-out house clothes. Taras earns money, I'm finding myself. You yourself said family should stick together, and now you're blaming us every day. I'm not blaming you, Oksana said, feeling the old ache in her chest that had stopped leaving her even in sleep. I'm just asking you to respect my things. This is my home. Ma'am, really, why make a problem out of nothing? Taras finally put his phone down and rubbed his forehead, sounding irritated. Solyomia just likes space, and you have so much extra junk here. Let's just live peacefully, okay? I have work in an hour, and you're both ruining the morning. Oksana turned silently to the sink and turned on the water to drown out their hurtful words. Her son always did this, diminished her feelings so he wouldn't have to openly clash with his wife. Solyomia looked satisfied. She gave a small laugh, poured herself some almond milk, and left the kitchen, slamming the door on purpose. Oksana was left alone. Water ran over her fingers, but she didn't feel its warmth. Outside, the birds were just waking up. It was a damp November morning. The sky hung over the old rooftops like a heavy gray blanket. From Hromadska Street came the muffled hum of traffic. Oksana worked as a senior accountant at a small logistics company near the city center. Usually, the morning walk through town was her only comfort. But today she didn't want to go anywhere. She wanted to disappear. She dressed quickly, trying not to make noise in the hallway, pulled on her old wool coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and quietly locked the front door behind her. The air outside was harsh, smelling of wet asphalt and smoke. She walked along the sidewalk, avoiding puddles, thinking about how quickly her life had turned into one long test of endurance. After her husband's death 5 years ago, she had learned to live for herself. She had renovated the apartment modestly, started saving for retirement, gotten used to drinking coffee on the balcony on weekends. And then Taras brought Solyomia home. At first, the girl had seemed sweet, polite, a little overconfident. But once they moved their things in, everything changed. Solyomia started setting her own rules. First it was subtle. She rearranged the dishes, threw out the houseplants because they supposedly stole the air, then took over the best shelf in the bathroom with her endless jars and bottles. Oksana endured it. She was a mother. She should understand the young. But the boundaries kept moving farther and farther. The road to the office took half an hour. Oksana passed Philharmonic Square, where janitors were slowly sweeping the fallen leaves. Work was routine, but today the numbers in the reports blurred before her eyes. Her colleague Maria, a woman her age, noticed right away that something was wrong. Your daughter-in-law drinking your blood again? Maria asked quietly, placing a cup of hot tea in front of her. Oksana, you're too soft. They've sat on your head and dangled their legs. What am I supposed to do, Maria? Oksana sighed. Throw them out? Taras is my son. He loves her. He's wrapped around her finger. If I start a fight, he'll just turn away from me. And I don't want to lose my son. You're already losing him, Maria said bluntly, sitting down at her desk. Because he let some girl wipe her feet on you in your own home. My husband would never try something like that. I'd show him the door fast. Let them rent somewhere and learn to respect other people's work and space. Oksana only sighed. Easy to say. But deep down she knew Maria was right. The problem was that Oksana was terrified of loneliness. After losing her husband, her son had become the center of her universe. At lunch, she decided to go for coffee to a small bakery on the next street. The line was short. She was just paying for her Americano when she heard a familiar voice. Oksana Mikhailovna? Is that you? She turned. A man stood before her in a dark coat, with a bit of gray at the temples and warm, slightly tired eyes. Bogdan. They had once been neighbors, back when Oksana lived in the old district before moving. He had been an engineer, married, with a daughter. Oksana remembered him as calm, balanced, always greeting people politely and offering to carry heavy bags. Bogdan? Goodness, I barely recognized you, she said, and to her surprise, a sincere smile appeared on her face, the first in a long time. Time passes. None of us are getting younger, he smiled back. You've hardly changed. Only your eyes seem a little sadder. How have you been? How is Taras? They left the bakery together and walked slowly down the street, holding paper cups of coffee. Oksana had planned to give her usual polite answer, that everything was fine, but for some reason, with this man beside her, she wanted to be honest. She briefly told him she was living with her son and daughter-in-law, trying not to complain too much. But Bogdan understood anyway. Living with newlyweds is always a trial, he said, looking at the cobblestones underfoot. I'm living alone now. Divorced 3 years ago. My daughter grew up and moved to Lviv for university, and stayed there. So here I am, alone in a big empty apartment. I work on the construction site for that new complex nearby. I'm sorry, Oksana said softly. Life is difficult, Oksana. But sometimes solitude is better than daily wars in your own house. You have the right to peace. Those words struck her right in the heart. He didn't judge her or give harsh advice like Maria. He simply acknowledged her right to a normal life. They exchanged phone numbers. Bogdan suggested they have coffee sometime on the weekend, just to talk. Oksana agreed, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. But that evening reality crashed down on her again. As soon as Oksana stepped inside the apartment, she heard loud voices from the kitchen. It smelled of burnt oil and sweet perfume. In the hallway stood 2 pairs of unfamiliar women's boots. She removed her coat and went to the kitchen. There, at the table, sat Soliomia with 2 of her friends. Bottles of wine stood on the table, sushi was scattered around, and a pan on the stove was smoking with something burnt. The girls were laughing loudly, but when Oksana entered, the laughter stopped abruptly. Oh, good evening, Soliomia drawled without standing up. We're just celebrating a little. I told Taras the girls would come. Didn't he tell you? He didn't, Oksana replied dryly. She looked at the dirty dishes already piling up in the sink and the soy sauce stains on her clean tablecloth. Could you at least turn on the exhaust fan? You can't breathe in here. One of Soliomia's friends rolled her eyes and whispered something to her. Soliomia snorted. Oksana Mikhailovna, we're relaxing. You can go to your room and close the door if the smell bothers you. We'll be done soon. Oksana felt anger rising in her throat. Silently, she turned around and went to her room. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she held her head in her hands. It was her home. Her walls. Her tablecloth, which she had washed with her own hands. Why should she hide in her own bedroom like an unwanted guest? 2 hours later, when the friends had finally left, Taras came in. He looked exhausted. Dark circles lay under his eyes. Oksana came out of her room hoping her son would at least help clean up the kitchen. But Taras walked straight past the kitchen and headed into Oksana's bedroom. "Ma'am, can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, sitting on the chair by her desk. Oksana sat opposite him, tension knotting in her chest. Taras rarely came to her just to talk. Usually, that meant he needed something. "What happened?" she asked, studying his tense face. "Solyomia wants to open her own manicure salon. A small studio in the center. She found the perfect place to rent. It needs cosmetic repairs and equipment. She has talent. She even finished the courses. How much money does she need?" Oksana asked directly, already knowing where this was going. 3,000 to start, Taras said, looking away. "We don't have that kind of savings right now. We spent everything on, the car, clothes." "Ma'am, I know you've been saving money for a deposit. Lend it to us. I'll return everything, I swear. As soon as the studio starts making a profit." Oksana stayed silent. She really did have savings, exactly $4,000, set aside carefully from every paycheck. It was her financial cushion, her only safety net in case of illness or some emergency. "Taras, that's my money for a rainy day. I can't just hand it over for some risky business. Solyomia has never worked a stable job. Business is a gamble. If she fails, how are you going to pay me back? You're already covering all her whims." Taras suddenly stood up. The chair scraped across the laminate floor. His face flushed with anger. "I knew you'd start counting other people's money and humiliating Solyomia," he snapped. "You just hate her. You don't want her to grow, don't want us to be happy. You want us to sit next to you forever and listen to your lectures. You know what? Keep your money. We'll manage on our own. But don't be surprised if we don't want to talk to you anymore." He stormed out, slamming the door. Oksana sat in silence as tears rolled down her cheeks. Her own son had just accused her of every sin in the world simply because she refused to hand over her last savings to his selfish wife. The next few days passed in heavy silence. Solyomia openly ignored Oksana, not even greeting her. She cooked only for herself and Taras, leaving dirty pots on the stove. Taras also avoided talking to his mother, answering only with short nods. Oksana felt like a ghost in her own home. The only bright spot was her meeting with Bogdan. They agreed to meet on Saturday afternoon in a small square near the university. It was sunny but cold. Bogdan was waiting for her with 2 cups of hot raspberry tea. "You look very tired, Oksana," he said gently, handing her a cup. "Has something happened?" They sat on a bench, and Oksana, unable to hold it in any longer, told him everything. The fight over money, the salon, how Taras accused her of hating Solyomia. As she spoke, she felt the heavy burden lifting from her shoulders. Bogdan listened carefully without interrupting. "Your son found himself between 2 fires, he said when she finished. But he chose the easiest path, to accuse the one who would forgive him. That is you." "What weakness?" she asked, surprised. "Fear. You're afraid of being alone. Afraid your son will leave and never come back. So you let her cross your boundaries. But believe me, until you set firm rules, the situation will only get worse. She won't stop." Oksana looked at him. There was a bitter truth in his words, one she had been afraid to admit to herself. They talked for a long time about life, work, and how hard it is to let adult children go. Bogdan spoke about his construction projects, about how much he loved working with his hands and creating something new. There was a reliability in him that Oksana had been missing for so long. When he accidentally touched her hand while passing her a napkin, she felt a pleasant warmth spread through her whole body. It was a long-forgotten feeling, to be a woman again, not just a mother, a daughter-in-law, or a convenient resource. On the way home, Oksana made a decision. She would talk to Taras face to face. She would offer to help them rent a separate apartment for the first few months. That would be her compromise. She was ready to spend part of her savings to reclaim her peace and her home. But the next evening all her plans shattered. It was Sunday. Oksana was making dinner, deciding to take a step toward reconciliation by preparing Tara's favorite baked chicken. When her son and Solyomia came into the kitchen, the atmosphere was tense, but Oksana tried to stay calm. They sat at the table. She placed the plates of food in front of them. Taras, Solyomia, I'd like to talk to you, she began gently, sitting opposite them. I understand it's hard for us to live together. You have your plans, your wishes. I've thought about it and decided I'm ready to help you rent a separate apartment for 6 months, until you get on your feet and save for your own place. She expected anything. Surprise, relief, maybe even awkward gratitude. But Solyomia only exchanged a look with Taras and gave a faint smile. Mrs. Oksana Mikhailovna, do you really think we want to wander around other people's apartments and pay rent just like that? We're not children. But you said yourself that it was cramped here, that you wanted more space, Oksana said, glancing at her son. Taras stared down at his plate and slowly chewed a piece of meat without lifting his eyes. It is cramped. That's why Solyomia and I found another solution. He finally looked at her. It's very inefficient for you to live alone in a 3-room apartment in such a good neighborhood. Utility bills are high, and it's hard to keep clean. We need money for the business startup and for a new apartment in a residential complex. We consulted a realtor. Oksana stopped breathing. Her heart seemed to freeze for several seconds, then started pounding wildly. With a realtor? What are you talking about? Her voice trembled. Ma'am, just listen, Taras said. Solyomia is right. You don't need such a big apartment. We'll sell it. We'll buy you a good 1-room apartment on the outskirts, where it's quiet and peaceful, and we'll keep the difference. That will be our startup capital. I'll put part of it into Solyomia's salon, and the rest will go toward the down payment for our new apartment. Oksana stared at her son and didn't recognize him. This was not the boy she had read bedtime stories to. Not the young man who had cried on her shoulder after his first serious failure. Before her sat a stranger, a cold adult man who was discussing her property, her life, her memories, with complete indifference. You want to sell my home? She whispered, feeling the kitchen walls press in on her from all sides. The home where I've spent my whole life? The home your father and I built brick by brick? Mrs. Oksana Mikhailovna, let's not do drama, Solyomia rolled her eyes, taking a glass of water. We're not throwing you out on the street. A 1-room apartment for a woman your age is perfectly fine, very European practice. You yourself said family should help each other. Taras is your only heir. What difference does it make whether he gets the money now or in 20 years? We need it now. Those words hit Oksana like a slap. They had already buried her in their minds. They were just waiting for her to vacate the space. This is my apartment. Her voice suddenly became firm, cold, and unfamiliar even to herself. She stood up from the table, bracing her palms on the counter. It is registered in my name, and I will not sell anything, not today, not tomorrow. Ma'am, don't start, Taras said, rising too. His face was again flushing with anger. You're being selfish. You want to sit on these square meters while your son struggles like a fish on dry land just to get established in life. I worked my whole life to have this roof over my head. And you want to come in empty-handed and just take it? Oksana looked him straight in the eye, ignoring Solyomia completely. If you need money for a business and a new apartment, go earn it. The renting is off. I'm giving you 2 weeks to find a place and move out. The kitchen fell into dead silence. Only the wind outside the window shaking the branches of the old tree, and rain tapping against the glass, could be heard. Solyomia turned pale. Her smug smile disappeared, replaced by naked rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed through her teeth, throwing back her chair and storming out of the kitchen. Taras remained standing, breathing heavily. He looked at his mother with such resentment, as if she had committed the worst crime in the world. "You just ruined my family, Mom," he said quietly, but clearly. "You chose your walls instead of me. I'll never forgive you for this." He turned and followed his wife. A few minutes later, Oksana heard the apartment.